All right. Our last chapter, David, we saved the best for last, and we're going off script. I think these two things we're going to talk about were referenced in the book, but I think a lot of one, we had a conversation with somebody who worked at Airbnb in the past and gave us some context on one of these. And the other one, Brian Chesky has spoken about at length in interviews, but we're going to hit both. Both are counterintuitive strategies that they've used to think about engaging customers, guests in more emotionally connected ways. So we're going to start a while back. There was a night Brian Chesky is watching a documentary on a personal hero of his, Walt Disney. And during this documentary, he sees a scene where he watches a Disney crew storyboard the Snow White movie. So they're in pre-production and they're storyboarding the narrative of the film. And he has this flash of an insight. He says, why don't we apply a storyboarding approach to how we think about designing the guest journey that we want to bring our users on? And so apparently he sends out a text that night, just said, be ready for Project Snow White. Shows up the next day. Nobody has any clue what he's talking about, but shows up and he maps out this vision for, we're going to go and we're going to create a visual representation, storyboard style, for the different stages or touch points that exist along the guest journey. And they brought in a Pixar artist to draw the visuals. And what was learned in this process is really interesting. Number one, by creating this process, it was cross-functional. It pointed everybody's attention towards creating an experience for the guests. So if you're an engineer or a designer or a marketer or an ops, no matter what you did, you were focused in this process on what is my role in contributing to the guest experience. The other thing that was learned was there's a difference in creating a guest journey through written words versus picture. And what I mean by that is when you write words, you don't have to make as many decisions. If I were to, think about Airbnb's guest journey, say you have the moment that somebody shows up at a rental. And when you write about that, you could be like, all right, well, the person needs to get there on time. They need to have access, whether the host lets them in or there's a code to get in. And, they need to come into a space that's as expected. And we're going to have those as a check marks in our touch point for entering an Airbnb rental. When you visualize that scene, all of a sudden, is it a man or woman who's entering? Are they young or old? Is it cold or warm outside? Are they having to put a key in? Are they having to punch a code in? What are they wearing? Do they have a lot of bags with them? All these decisions become critical to make a picture come to life that allow everybody to get dialed in a way more detail-oriented way on what is the ideal customer experience or guest experience in this context. And so Project Snow White, they end up taking the storyboards and they've put them up in their office. So every employee who comes into the office can see the customer journey in visual format. And it's become this culturally aligning artifacts that allow them to anchor on, all right, what are we really driving? One, we're able to see a person interacting both on the host side and on the guest side. So we're connected to the real people that are at the end of the work that we do in an office every day. Two, they have to think about the decisions and trade-offs to be made. And then there's a constant reevaluation of as consumer preferences change, as technology changes, as what hosts need change, as the law changes. There's this going back to the well and redesigning that happens, but it allows you to have a strong starting point for each iteration. So Project Snow White, I think, was a wildly counterintuitive process that was used by Airbnb to think about reimagining the guest experience. Unless you have any thoughts before I hit the second.
Well, I know you were able to talk to the artists involved. Are you going to?
So I can, yeah. So
Sure.
I got to have coffee with an incredible artist named Nick Sung. Worked at Pixar, Airbnb, has done a lot of incredible work since then, and was able to talk about just how inspiring and motivating that work was for that culture and that organization, how cross-functionally aligning it was, and how questions that had never been asked before were being asked because of the nature of making something visual. And so we got to do a 2-hour coffee. It was amazing. As a huge fan of Airbnb, we're obviously doing this episode. I feel like I strong-armed you into this one as a massive fan. It was such a fun conversation, and he was great. And just super generous and sharing his thoughts and perspective along the way. But yeah, so got this from like the story from a first person source who was able to see and be a part and active participant in taking what was a process that didn't exist. It was a vision in Brian Chesky's head from a documentary he watched and take it into real life and rally a team around it.
Mm.
So that was the Snow White process. The other process, which is similar in its experience design, is Brian Chesky in interviews specifically with Reid Hoffman of Masters of Scale fame and so many other things. But he has a really great podcast. Talks about designing 11-star experiences. And here's I love this story.
Yeah.
Here's the insight. So Brian Chesky and their team at Airbnb realized that when a guest rates their experience, they rate it on a 1 to 5 scale. And he said, if everything goes wrong, you get a 1. If one thing goes wrong, you get a 3. If nothing goes wrong, you get a 5 stars. And he said, if we're only aiming for nothing going wrong, 5 stars, we're never going to deepen the emotional connection that people feel with our brand. She says, if we're going to actually grow, we need people to love us, who keep coming back and tell other people about us. What does it look like to break past the 5-star scale? So he asked his team, what does a 6-star experience look like? What is above a 5-star? And they came up with a bunch of stuff, and I won't go through all the things that they came up with, but it was, maybe there's a personalized snack waiting there for a guest when they show up. He says, great, what's a 7-star experience? And then what's an 8-star? And then by the end, it was an 11 stars, like you're getting a rocket ship to Mars to be the first human being to end up on planet Mars. And what he found was by thinking through 11-star experiences, they were able to find experiences they could offer that exceeded what they thought was previously possible, but were before what was actually impossible, where remarkable experiences live. And so everybody, most hotels are trying to create 5-star experiences, meet expectations at a very high level. Airbnb is thinking about like, how do we break that scale and do things that are so unexpected that we would earn a 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th star. So 2 very counterintuitive approaches to thinking about creating experiences that I believe has been one of the drivers of the love that they have from their guests that have propelled them to the growth that they've seen.
I've heard you say it this way, that remarkable experiences live between what we currently think is possible and what's impossible.
Yeah.
Like that's the territory. And you kind of said that a minute ago, but I wanted to just nail that one down. I thought that was always a great insight for me. It's like where we currently think is possible, what's impossible, and somewhere between those are some remarkable experiences.
So I think as we think about takeaways from the chapters that we've done and all the research that we've done, I think it's clear that Airbnb, it's in their DNA to be design first. And I think because they lean into that distinctness, you end up using processes like Project Snow White, like 11-star experience design, in a way that most companies would never think of using them. I think that you think about leading with caring crisis, the ability for self-awareness, know that like, no, this is a moral thing, not just a business thing, and to act differently because of it. I think about having a cockroach mentality of business is often less about being your best and more about how do you find a way to survive when you're not at your best. And I think Airbnb time and time again showed up and found ways to survive when they maybe shouldn't have, but that cockroach ability allowed them to survive. Curious as we wrap on what's been a fun Airbnb segment.
2 things that I would add to what you just said. What struck me is the importance of identity. When we were talking about earlier, missionaries, mercenaries. Missionaries are all about identity. Mercenaries are all about money, and identity is at the core of this brand, and it's an identity that brings out the best in human beings. It's the serial entrepreneurs, and even their list of values being so unique because it provides a unique identity. It's not this generic commodity that most people put values at the center of their business and their brand that are just generic that everyone would agree with. These were unique, specific. The other thing is, I think they understand and leverage the power of culture. I think culture is such a fuzzy, squishy idea for most people, especially business people, because as business people, we want to reduce everything to numbers on a spreadsheet. It's kind of like if you can't measure it, you can't, manage it. And, it's all about numbers, numbers, numbers. And there is something, about that is true, but to limit our thinking to numbers on a spreadsheet will limit our ability to create a magnificent business like Airbnb. And I think culture is the squishy part, which is why a lot of people don't appreciate it so much, but it's also the powerful part. And it's the missionary part. It's the purpose part. It's the part that injects love and, emotion into what would otherwise be a stagnant, detached organization. So many times we had this self-awareness. He was drifting toward the corporate norm, and he caught himself, moving in the direction of, nope, we're going to have an identity that's powerful, a culture that's powerful, the emotional connection that's powerful, and that will help us overcome all these challenges that come our way.
If I had to sum up Airbnb's business strategy in as few words as possible, and this is going to be called back to language you used previously, I'd say it's make something people want for 100 people who love you instead of make something people like for 1,000,000 people who sort of like you. And so many people think about what's good enough. What do people like for the masses? And I think they find they in very bloody competitive waters. But the ability to think about no, how do we make something people want, love, make something beautiful for people who actually love you, that raving fan base is really, I think, simply put, the business strategy that's led to the decisions they made and help them grow at the rate that they have.
We should keep that in mind as we grow this podcast.
This is next conversation.
100 people that love it, you're welcome.
Yeah. For the one person we each forced to listen to this one, you're welcome. Yeah. David, excited for our next brand we cover.
We have a lot to learn.
We have a lot to learn.
So let's sojourn.
Time to dive in.
All right, buddy.
All right. Thank you, David.